Dirty Scrap Podcast.
Hello everyone, hola hola a todos, this is Julio Quintero, host of Dirty Scrap Aluminum Podcast, the podcast where we dive into the sustainability point of view of every industry, but mostly on the aluminum side. So today, and something that is inspiring me to talk about this video is I was checking one of the last videos of John Sacco talking about that the CO2 emissions has no borders, and I am totally agree. But saying that, let's face this first, let's say, stage of this episode, and let me look something that I was reading here or writing down better because I don't want to mislead here something when we want to talk about something that is very important like is CO2 emissions, because we've been, like, let's say, hearing about this for a long time. So for you to have an idea, in the 80s, all the several governments, and you can go and see Biden when he was able to talk pretty well, he was even there talking about climate change and how everything was changing and how we need to afford let's say all the practices that we need to implement in the next into the next years. That was in 1980s or in the 80s, to reduce and to face climate change and to fight against that. Now, for you to have an idea, when they make this program, they printed around $50 trillion. It's a lot of money, a lot of money. So you can start understanding how this, was like focusing on moving in the direction that, okay, we will start printing money in order to help the planet to have a better health. Now, saying that, at that point, a lot of companies, a lot of industries, a lot of countries were using nuclear power, right? Was clean, was almost unlimited, but then in some point we started like asking ourselves why we don't use other type of energies and resources, and let's say that the flag was CO2 emissions reduction. CO2 emissions reduction. So just for you to have an idea, in 2013, the global average CO2 level was more or less 395 parts per million. 2013. In 2023, we just increased our CO2 emissions content into the atmosphere from 395 to 420 parts per million. It's not that much. So it is accurate to say that make a revolutionary decision on the industry should be like the CO2 emissions, or we need to understand very well what is going on in the economy to understand how we can really implement sustainable practices that can make our companies better, more efficient, more profitable, and try to keep the aluminum that we are creating in the US for the US. So why I am talking about this? Because the issue that I am seeing here is I think we don't understand very well what is CO2 emissions and what is the real danger that we have here, or if it's not a danger at all. So I was checking this video of John Sacco, and I like him. He's super good on what he is doing, but I am not agreeing one thing, that the focusing on CO2 emissions is not the right focus that we need to have in order to increase and improve our industry. And I'm talking more about aluminum. He's more focusing on steel mills. But do you have an idea about what is the CO2 level in percentage in the atmosphere today? Because that's the point of view that we need to approach and say, okay, is this a reality? Is something that is changing our climate? Is something that is real, something real that we really need to face in order to make sense all these changes that we did into the past 20 decades or something like that, in the past 20 years. It is something that help us to justify what we have done into our industry, or is not. So let me give you some details here. Percentage today of CO2 in our atmosphere is 0.04%, and it's been like that for the last 10 years. It's not moving. Actually, 10 years ago was 0.04. Today is 0.04 to 5. In 10 years, we increase almost nothing. And do you have, or you are, let's say, aware what is going to happen if we reduce even more the CO2 into our atmosphere? If we go below 0.02%, we will kill all the plants that are the systems that are creating the oxygen that we breathe in order to live. So what is the real situation and what is not? Let's talk about CO2 emissions in the aluminum industry. We already know that the primary industry is creating more and more CO2 emissions because has a really intensive energy consumption once you want to transform or to create aluminum out of the mineral, right? So we are moving to the recycling industry that allowed us to have 95% savings on the energy that we will use in order to transform the scrap to something useful in some aluminum product that we can use. Maybe an ingot, a billet. I don't know, if we go to the automotive sector, so some automotive parts, it is really something that we need to take in account, like the CO2 emissions is something that we really need to fight again? I don't think so. I think that sustainability should be, and this is the way that I am moving forward with my company and the equipment that I am putting out there in the US, bringing European technology, because Europe went through this, let's say, path too many years ago. So in the 80s, several countries make the decision and they said, okay, let's create this program to save the world. Let's print 50 trillion. 50 trillion. It's a crazy amount of money, but obviously all this money, I don't know where that money it is right now, but let's say that they took the money and they use it to change something into the industries, but those industries that they didn't do it, like China, went ahead. So they increased the economy, they improved the economy, and people like the people in the United States and some of the other countries in Europe, they just slow down the economy. So it is true that we need to go in that direction. And I know that this is something different that I am talking right now. It's a different approach. It's not the same approach that we have in Dirty Scrap that we are always talking about sustainability. And I love sustainability. Don't get me wrong. But for me, sustainability is something different. Sustainability is a better way to make things more efficient. It's not just related to CO2 emissions, because for me, CO2 emissions is not an issue. Obviously, you need to reduce your CO2 emissions because you don't want, or you want to avoid to have all these, let's say, bad environment into your facility. You don't want that your workers, your community is breathing black smoke. I understand and I am completely agree. But I think the sustainability point of view should come on how I can reuse the energy that I am creating into my process, how I can have a better sortation processes that allow me to have better material or better raw material that will increase my melting efficiency, and I will create more metal out of the metal that I am using in order to, recycling, in order to have a better recycling process. The less dross you create, the more aluminum you will have at the end of your process, so the more money that you will make out of your process, so your facility is going to be more healthy. And if you have a really good sorting and cleaning process, you will avoid all these CO2 emissions, and also you will avoid black smoke generation. You will avoid pollution, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. But once we go and approach to what is happening in the real world, in the real situation, CO2 emissions is really nothing to worry about. So if we are talking about innovation, better technology, better sorting activities or approaches, what we need to understand is this approach is something that will allow United States aluminum recycling industry to be better and more competitive. Not is just because it's going to be green. Everyone can be green, and even though be not competitive. Look at China. China is doing a great work having all this flexibility on the primary aluminum sector, and yes, they are creating some contamination. They need to avoid that for sure. We need to work on that. But that is not the real issue that we have here. The real issue that we have here, if we are not doing the right practices with the right technology to be more competitive, so we need to rely on ourselves on third parties outside, like China, Russia, and other parties, other countries that can help us to support the demand of aluminum that we have internally right now. So what is going on with President Trump and all this political brief that we are seeing right now? Let's talk about that. So, and again, don't get me wrong, CO2 emission reduction is something that we need to do and face very hard, yes, but it's not the issue. I've been talking about this for a long time already. I think that we need to stop comparing the secondary aluminum industry against the primary one. It's not the same industry. That means that if we keep comparing the secondary aluminum industry against the primary aluminum industry, the competitive side of the secondary aluminum industry is not growing as fast and in the right way as we want, because we are comparing ourselves with something that is totally different. We need to compare the secondary aluminum industry against the secondary aluminum industry 10 years ago, or from now on 10 years ahead. That means that we need to implement better systems. We need to implement better activities. We need to implement better energy recovery systems and closed loop system in order to be more energetically efficient. Is that a way to say that? Well, you understand what I'm saying. You need to be more energy efficient. So the way to do it is to have closed loop systems that allow you to use the energy that you create into the process. But it's not about CO2 emissions reduction. It's about how I can make more with what I have instead of trying to put more into my process in order to make more. The idea is to make the idea of being more efficient is to create more from what we already have. So lose less material, increase the efficiency, have more energy, have more cleaning process. So let's talk about the political brief. Let's go with the first item. So the first one is the trade enforcement. That means that we need to allow us to not be rely on or to not rely ourselves on third parties. That means that we need to keep the aluminum here, but also how we can fight those people that is bringing more and more aluminum into the US that is not allowing our industry to have this, let's say, pressure and make ourselves bigger and with more practices so we can create more aluminum in our country that can help us to let's say, supply the demands instead of buying the aluminum out of the country. So the first thing that we need to do is, or the first thing that we will see in this, let's say, Trump administration is tariff. Everyone is talking about tariff. So let's talk about tariff. We are having tariff for Mexico. Why? I will explain why later. Also China and Canada. Canada is a little bit complicated because we are almost the same country, right? Mexico obviously is North America, but it's a Latin place, it's a huge country, and blah, blah, blah. It's a totally different history. But Canada, we've been in this partnership for a long time, and Canada is providing 1/3 of the aluminum that we are consuming here in the US. Now with the tariff, I think it's going to be around 25, between 10 and 25%. Well, we have this, the Prime Minister of Canada is saying, okay, you want to do that? Well, we're going to do the same for some of the products that you are bringing from the US to Canada, and we will focus and encourage our people to buy more Canadian products. So they want to make something very similar to what the United States wants to do. Now, saying that, I think what we are seeing right now between the Canada and US administrations is United States really want to make Canada the next new state in the United States, right? And I think it's not going to happen, but all these political and economical pressures are going in that direction. So we will see more aluminum coming off Canada. Probably we will need it, of course, but it's going to be more expensive. Yes, it's going to be more expensive. So what we need to do is to have two different approaches here. Trying to make more primary industries in the US that I think is not that easy, but the second portion of this approach, and I think it's something that we really need to think about it, is increasing our recycling rate. How? Well, we need to go from 40% of aluminum cans, for example, that we are recycling to 60 or to 70%. Instead of putting everything into a landfill, we need to have a better sorting processes that allow us to sort better and segregate and separate better contaminants and different alloys, so we will have more aluminum, clean one, to increase our productions, but also to increase our efficiency. So we don't need to deal with all this tariff and all this political bullshit. Sorry about that, but it is what it is. So we can have a good price for the end consumer and not to punish the end consumer that much. That's the first one. Let's talk about the second one. The second one is directly connected with what I was talking, and is enhancing recycling infrastructure. Enhancing recycling infrastructure means that we need to understand how we can collect more aluminum into our facilities, how we can make this aluminum more clean to have more efficiency, and how we can be more sustainable from the point of view of that we are reusing our energy and we are also making more money out of what we are doing right now. How to do this? It's very simple. So when I say it's very simple, it's because we need to understand where we are right now and how to go and make the jump for what we want to be in the future, right? So that's what I am saying. CO2 is not the issue because you can reduce your CO2 emission in so many different ways. But the reality is what you really need to understand is how I can make my company more profitable so I can keep my workers, I can make more money out of my aluminum, I can be more clean, so I can be more, let's say, friendly with my community and with my workers, and how I can reduce the energy consumption against other secondary aluminum companies, because that's the cooperation that I need to do, so I can be more competitive and I can sell my green aluminum more expensive in the same industry because I am making better practice. It's not just because my CO2 emissions are zero. It's because I am really making good practices that allow me to be more efficient, that allow me to be less contaminant, but allowing me to to make more innovation and to sort and collect more aluminum. So in that way, I will keep the aluminum into the US, not sending the aluminum out of the US or to some landfills. So my industry is going to grow and I will support better the economy so I can create better product. That's the way. So I need to play with those tariffs, increasing my recycling infrastructure, collecting more aluminum, being able to introduce better technology that will make my company more efficient. Not, I mean, contamination is also something that we need to talk about it. But if you are more efficient, that means that you are processing clean aluminum or more clean aluminum into your process. You are adding more recyclable or recycling aluminum or more aluminum scrap into your process, so you don't need too much the primary aluminum into your process. That's sustainability for me. It's not thinking about CO2. CO2 is 0.04%. If we go below 0.02, we're gonna be dead. So we don't want that, right? And we have a space there. So we need to increase, because all the policies that we are seeing in this new administration, we need to increase our recycling infrastructure. That means that, and I said this so many different times, even by myself or even with some podcast guests when we were talking about scrap jars and recycling companies and aluminum transformation companies or cast houses. We know those aluminum recycling companies here or foundries here in the US. We need to close the gap between those industries. We need to start thinking that those industries are different industries. So if we want to increase our recycling infrastructure, we need to merge those companies or those industries together in order to collect more aluminum and keep the aluminum in the US. Let's talk about the next one. I'm going to read this one because that will allow us to have a better analysis about what is going on. So the next one is recognizing aluminum's strategy important. That means that we need to understand that aluminum, and we need to acknowledge the aluminum industry as a critical to the economy and the national security. Why? Because when we understand that, we will have this idea on not to start buying aluminum from the adversaries out there. And when I am saying adversaries, I am not talking about some that the people out there is our enemy. I'm a Latin guy. I'm not going in that direction. But what we need to understand from the economical point of view, if we are relying ourselves on a third party that is fighting against the US to make themselves the next big country and the leader in the economy world, we are losing the game. So what we need to understand is aluminum industry, the recycling industry, the foundry industry, the smelting industry, the cast houses are really critical for the economy. Then we will need, or we will start understanding how important in this industry, and we will start paying more attention on what we really need to do in order to put this industry in the place that we really need to put it. So the next thing is we need to understand, and the government need to understand, and I think they are doing it right now, and with Elon Musk in the government close to Trump, I think we will see more and more aluminum recycling industries growing a lot because the EVs and the SpaceX and all this different stuff that we have going on right now. But we need to understand the importance of the aluminum recycling industry into the economy, because this will push the industry very far away, but also the economy very far away. So we will be more competitive. But again, the fight is not against the climate change. It's against ourselves to understand how we can make this industry more important, understanding that sustainability is making things better inside our practices to make more money out of it and to have everyone happy. That's the deal. CO2 emissions, we can talk about that. We can keep working about that. But what we don't need right now is that the CO2 emissions, let's say, be like a wall that is not allowing us to grow as an industry. So the next point is, okay, let's face it. Aluminum is very important for the economy. Let's keep fighting to make this aluminum industry more and more, let's say, reliable in order to be more competitive. So we don't need to depend on third parties so we can increase our internal economy. But what we need to understand is we need to implement and we need to invest. We need to implement more technology, better technology. We need to merge some industries together to have better aluminum and to be able to collect more aluminum and not allow the aluminum to go out of. So that's the next one. The one that is following right now is what I just said. We need to encourage domestic investment, and we are seeing a lot of companies doing great jobs, like Spectral Alloys merging with EJI, that is a huge company. And we are seeing a lot of different companies making a lot of investments here. And just for you to have an idea, we are expecting just here in the US 100 million tons of aluminum billets to be used in the next 10 years. That is a lot of aluminum that we need to manufacture or here, because if not, it's going to come from out there. And imagine with the tariff, 25%. Let's talk about Mexico tariff. Mexico has a great growth as a company, as an industry, talking about the aluminum side. As a country, yes, it's growing. Mexico is great. But let's face it, the aluminum industry is growing a lot. Why? Why is that? Two things, simple to understand. Manufacturing in the US is too expensive. That's why we have all these immigrants coming here and the companies taking on all these illegal immigrants because they can pay very low wages so you can have more profit out of your payroll, right? Is fair or is not fair? I am not going in that direction. It is what it is. But because it is too expensive to manufacture here in the US, we as companies from the US, we are going to Mexico because the labor is good. Mexican people work as hell, but also it's cheaper, and you can still have in some type of relationship between the US market and the Mexican market. At the end, it's the same market, kind of. The border is there. You don't need to oversee something. So that's the first thing. The first thing, the Mexican aluminum company, or the aluminum industry in Mexico is growing a lot because a lot of companies are migrating from US to Mexico to make everything more cheaper so you can sell here in a better price and make more money out of there. Now, saying that, China says, oh, okay, we have all this tariff. If we send something from China, okay, let's base our companies in Mexico. It's cheap. We can start making more money, or we can still make money in that country, and then we will avoid all the tariff because it's a Mexican product that is coming from Mexico to the US. So what we are seeing, tariff up to 25%. What is the only condition to not raise those tariffs? We have two different conditions. The first one, we need, or Mexican government needs to compromise, to have the commitment on stop drug dealers sending drugs to the border into the US. It is something that is complicated. Oh yeah, definitely, because Mexican government has a lot of issues with, people from these drug lords, cartels inside the government. So it's complicated. I don't want to go into that direction, but I'm from Colombia. We had the same, and it's complicated. But President of Mexico just said that she will do it, and looks like they are putting a lot of effort to trying to, not keep sending drugs from Mexico to the US. And the other condition to not increase the tariff is, as I already said in a few videos before, is stop human trafficking through the border. That I think that's the most important one. The drugs is an issue that we had in the US for a long time. We need to educate the society in the US to not doing it, so we will stop the demand. So the offer is going to decrease, right? It's easy to solve it. Look at the Salvador country, they just did it. But on the other side, human trafficking is something that we really need to avoid. We are talking about human people that is being trafficked from one country to another, and some of them are children that they are missing. I think Donald Trump is making a really good decision on that. So Mexico, if you want to avoid tariff, just take care of those two different things, and then we're good. So That is going on in Mexico. So, again, guys, as a summary, what I am thinking is we need to understand that CO2 emissions is not the issue. Sustainability needs to be something that we need to approach in order to make things better, to make more money out of it, to have better technology and to be more competitive. But it's not just for the CO2, because CO2, in other words, is not the enemy. The enemy is our internal belief that we are not approaching to this industry in the right way because we don't understand what we need to fight. And what we need to fight for is to have more efficiency and don't allow the aluminum going out of the US or to a landfill. That's my approach. It's my personal opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I'm thinking. Now, the second thing is we need to increase we need to increase our recycling infrastructure. So we need to make more internal investment. So we need to partner up more and more with the scrap yards. We need to understand better sorting technology. We need to understand better high efficiency melting technology and how to partner up those different technologies in order to increase our efficiencies on the aluminum, let's say, recycling side. But we also, and this is very important, we also need to understand that we need to stop relying ourselves on third parties. We have everything what we need here in order to be something great into the aluminum industry for the world and for the economy, not just for the US. So if I need to say something about how to start this 2025 into the aluminum industry is let's talk about technology. Let's talk about the right practice. Let's talk about how to increase our recycling infrastructure. Let's not keep talking about CO2, but let's talk about better ways to increase our melting efficiencies and how to collect more aluminum instead of putting the aluminum into the landfill. At the end, we will have more flexibility here with the Trump administration, yes. But again, don't, let's say, get lazy because we will have that. No, let's keep moving forward on the technology and innovation that we are sure that will make our industry more competitive. This is Julio Quintero. This is like a brief summary about what we are thinking, or I am thinking about what is going to be this 2025 with all this tariff and the political brief and all these, let's say, green trends that we are seeing right now. Again, CO2 emissions has no borders, as John Sacco said. Yes, totally agree, but it's not the enemy. The enemy is not understanding that we can be better without fighting against some enemy that is not real. The real enemy here is how we can integrate better technologies and how we can integrate industries together to make this aluminum industry more profitable and more competitive for the world, not just for the United States. Take care, guys. Bye-bye. This is Very Scrap, the Aluminum Podcast. Please follow us. Give me some comments. Let me know if you want to talk about different topics, and we will have more guests this 2025 that I am completely excited about what is coming for this podcast and this platform. Thank you, guys. I'm Julio Quintero, Dairy Scrap, the Aluminum Podcast host, and I am so happy to be here with all of us and you guys, and let's make this industry better working together. Bye-bye.
Dirty Scrap Podcast.